Throughout most of our academic lives, at some point or another, we have come to know about the six kingdoms of life respectively. And for those who aren't quite sure, let me jog your memory. There are six kingdoms of life that make up the different parts of life, classifying all living things that we know across the globe. We have animals, plants, fungus, protists, archaebacteria, and eubacteria, with every known species of life having fallen into one of these kingdoms. Of these six, they come with various qualities that classify them. Animals being, animals, in that they consume other organisms, whether that be plants or other animals, with examples such as fish, deer, and birds. Plants being those that photosynthesize, producing their own food from the sun, like trees, flowers, and bushes. Fungi being those that absorb from decaying matter, with the most well known of these being your mushrooms, yeasts, and molds, for example. Protists being a fair mixture of both having the ability to make their own food as well as gaining food from consuming other organisms and decaying matter. These being our algae, amoebas, and paramaceas. And finally, you have both types of bacteria, with your archaebacteria being bacteria that's ancient and that's only found in extremely harsh environments like deep sea vents or hot springs, where there is no oxygen present. They are sort of like a living fossil, with the earliest archaebacteria appearing around 3.8 billion years ago. Meanwhile, the other types of bacteria, eubacteria, are those kinds of bacteria found all over the earth, with E. coli and Salmonella being just some of these. Despite all of this, scientists since the late 1800s have had an over 165-year battle that's still ongoing to classify a particularly odd species from the late Silurian. This is a prototaxite, an 8-meter tall, or are those 26-foot tall, living column. A completely questionable thing, not only to the eyes of the average person, but to scientists alike, with prototaxites being the tallest thing on land during its time, with the next biggest thing at the time being Cooksonia, a 6-centimeter tall primitive version of a leafless plant, nowhere near the heights of prototaxites, making it so the late Silurian to the late Devonian era had prototaxites towering over most of the landscapes on Earth. Due to this massive size, they came with massive supports, terraforming the land where they stood, with it being believed that they anchored themselves to the ground with an ancient form of mycelium in a sort of underground mat like various modern fungi of today. With this breakthrough literally carving out the soil into different layers and levels of Earth for millions of years, allowing for a far better quality soil for those around it. With overall prototaxites unknowingly being a great help to the development of all kinds of life, not only allowing for a better quality of soil for plants, but also providing homes from the harsh weathers, with it being found that various species of ancient insect and mites, such as ancient millipedes, springtails, and orbited mites, burrowed into prototaxites in order to make homes, using both their stable structure via squishy inner material to allow for sites for nesting and housing during harsh weathers. This, however, was not always a bonus, as discovered in various prototaxite fossils. Some have been found to be heavily charred, with it being concluded that prototaxites, while successful, had their large drawbacks, with their largest weakness being that of the weather itself, with these 26-foot tall pillars acting as a sort of natural lightning rod, that they were made from extremely flammable organic matter instead of copper, with fossil evidence such as in Cardiff, Wales, finding notable amounts of specimens that contained large amounts of charcoal deposits indicating that this was not only the case, but happened fairly frequently. Despite all this knowledge that scientists have on prototaxites, identification is a whole nother story, with this being an over 165-year-old debate that's still largely ongoing today, with the most recent theories and new evidence coming out as early as January of this year. However, since the first fossil's discovery in 1843 in Canada, its history in paleontology has been nothing short of debate. Starting out in the year 1859, following a Canadian paleontologist known as John Dawson, taking a sample of the first initial discovery in 1843 and coming to his first conclusion with his first U theory, concluding that it was a part of some sort of primitive coniferous tree, with this theory being the first theory placed upon the specimen since its discovery. Following this, his rival in 1872 concluded that Dawson was completely incorrect, rather pushing forth his giant marine alga theory, whereby he suggested, through the structure's internal microscopic tubes, that it couldn't be that of a tree, reclassifying it officially as some sort of giant mega-alga, basically a giant species of ancient seaweed. This continued on, with infrequent but detailed debating about what the large creature could be of, with suggestions in 1919 and later in 2001 that allured it towards being a more land-based sort of giant mushroom or plant, with evidence in the tubing of the structure coming forth, with it being found under a microscope that prototaxites were made up of mass amounts of woven tubes around 50 micrometers in diameter, completely throwing any idea of it being some kind of seaweed or large algae out the window. As well as this, around the early 2000s, it was also found that they used underground mycelium networks and above-ground fruiting bodies, both of which are found in modern mushrooms, officially switching its classification to that of a fungus, this of which would stay certain until very recently, whereby new evidence surfaced. This leads us to today, whereby it's less widely accepted that prototaxites were not just some form of giant mushrooms. Rather, the classification is left unknown, with new evidence such as a lack of chitin being present, chitin of which is found in all modern mushrooms, as well as having a completely unique chemical signature to which nothing alive today shares, completely jolting its classification towards something more unknown to modern biology. Overall, placing prototaxites scientifically in an odd hybrid category that doesn't place it into any of the 6 kingdoms that we have largely accepted in modern biology, having a mixture of odd characteristics that would place it into one kingdom of life, then having others that would place it into a different kingdom. Some of these examples could be the presence of tree rings, plant-like lignin molecules, a capability to excrete digestive juices into the surrounding earth, feeding on largely dead organic matter, and even having animal-like characteristics such as blood capillaries and having distinct internal organs. From the modern perspective, it is now even theorized that prototaxites could possibly be an independent experiment in life, being credited to being a possible evolutionary branch of its own that started and ended with prototaxites hundreds of millions of years ago, with prototaxites going extinct around 360 million years ago and having left no modern descendants behind, overall contributing to a possible new 7th kingdom of life that we have otherwise lost to time. The disappearance of prototaxites, however, is fairly unknown, while seemingly having a dominant dynasty that spanned the Earth, being far more developed at the time than plant life, fungi, or any protists of the time, they seemingly vanished. Following the early Devonian around 370 million years ago, the downfall of prototaxites can be seen with a rise in vascular plants such as Cooksonia that I mentioned earlier, giving rise to advanced rooted plants, conifers, and early trees that theorized to have rapidly began outcompeting prototaxites for the resources within soils and waters, even having weakened prototaxites in some theories, with evidence of prototaxites collapsing and falling into various rivers and lakes, with their lifeless bodies carving out and developing rivers and lakes further than they otherwise would be, naturally. Overall, the mystery of these weird organic monoliths is still ongoing, and while strange, they prove to be extremely important, undoubtedly changing the planet's chemistry as we know it on a fundamental level, and providing a base for the plants that completely cover our planet today to thrive. I'm not all too sure myself, however the most interesting of these theories would definitely be that they are of a seventh kingdom, although until further scientific debate and evidence comes through, the identification of these giants is left on a cliffhanger for now. But with that, that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed listening, and if you have any opinions of your own, or anything I missed about prototaxites, a comment would be much appreciated. But with that, thank you and goodbye.